Xi has a vested interest in maintaining power, maintaining control over Taiwan, control over Hong Kong, and all this is going to have cascading implications for him within his own party, and so things can escalate really quickly. And honestly, American news outlets should be very, very careful about how they report on this, because things can escalate really fast, and we could have a Tiananmen Square Part 2 before we know it.
Well, you have, listen, protesters who are now disrupting the airport, protesters that are disrupting business in Hong Kong. When you're talking about things like this that are now impacting financials and impacting business in one of the biggest financial markets in the world, is this the type of situation where China, mainland China, Beijing now is getting much closer to doing something and to responding, where they're going to be forced to react?
Sure. In the short term, economics plays a big role. The longer that business is held up by people not being able to fly in or out of Hong Kong, businesses not being able to resume their normal activities by protesters in the street, police clashes, certainly the big flashpoint would be, as we saw some alleged military vehicles, what it looks like parking up in Shenzhen, I believe. If that crosses into Hong Kong, I think we're going to really see a business problem for the Hong Kong people and for the Chinese at large. But the main problem really is the long-term implications for the Chinese Communist Party and for President Xi himself. If he loses Hong Kong and is allowing the protesters to undermine his leadership, it's going to really have cascading implications for him.
This all started in part because protesters wanted to maintain their semi-autonomy in Hong Kong. It had to do with, of course, the extradition bill, and it expanded into several other initiatives and things that, of course, protesters are calling for. They now want Carrie Lam to step down. They want a crackdown on police brutality. But it all started with an effort to keep whatever autonomy that they have. Could the exact opposite come to fruition if these protests happen? Could they lose their autonomy then?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because it's almost a self-perpetuating cycle. If the extradition bill passes and the protest of which were deemed terrorism, as we saw, it was just called by the foreign minister to Hong Kong. If that is considered to be terrorism, then you can be extradited to China to face crimes for the potential commission of terrorism against the Chinese Communist Party, against the state of China more largely. So you're seeing the millennials are largely the people that are protesting this, and they're saying that in 2042, I believe it is, where there is this the relationship between Hong Kong and China goes away, and I guess they're going to have to renegotiate what is the semi-autonomous region status of Hong Kong. And when that happens, the millennials are going to be the ones in 20 years that are going to have to be the ones on the negotiating floor of what that means. And so I think you're seeing a point where people are having to recognize that this is a particular moment in time, and this is a bill that could undermine a lot of the rights that the Hong Kong people have, specifically Hong Kong young people, and they're not going to back down until they have a resolution that they deem acceptable.
Very quickly, can you explain what you said just a few moments ago at the outset about how the West needs to be careful about how they report on this?
Absolutely. I think there's a tendency in the modern political moment to criticize anything that the president does. I think that the president, when he played into Beijing's hand, I thought it reported a lot when he called it a riot. I think it's important for the president, and the president is smart, to stay outside of commentating on this issue, because, as I said, President Xi's power largely depends on perception within China. That's why you see propaganda happening within China. And so if President Trump were to stand in the void and look as if he's undermining President Xi's power, I think President Xi is giving even more incentive to act in Hong Kong.